Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of The Bitter Pill. Today I want to come across a pretty bizarre example of Trump derangement syndrome, a blue no matter who insanity that I've come across a few times in the last few days, where basically people who are supporting Biden have this idea that Trump is so uniquely evil, more evil than Bush or Reagan or Andrew Jackson or whoever you want to bring up, that somehow he has these sorts of magical powers to steal elections, even in states that are not ever swing states in close elections. So, uh, just to advocate voting for Biden, regardless of what state you live in. So, one example of that was a open letter, Dump Trump, Then Battle Biden, that appeared in Common Dreams on commondreams.org the other day, co-authored by Noam Chomsky and an assortment of other progressive writers and activists. So they claim, the most urgent task that we have is defeating Trump in the election with as big an electoral college margin as possible to undermine his predictable efforts to steal the election. So it undeniably comes down to this: help Biden or increase the risk that Trump wins. And what helps elect Biden? Voting for Biden all over helps ward off post-election Trumpian tactics. Voting for Biden in swing states is essential. So in other words, they're using the same bizarre argument that less progressive, more mainstream, middle of the road or liberal Biden supporters use, that anything that isn't a vote for Biden somehow helps Trump, no matter where you live, which is absurd because we have an electoral college, right? Meaning that for the most part, in every state, all of the states' electoral votes go to the presidential candidate who won the popular vote or got a plurality of the popular vote, and the losing candidate in that state doesn't get any electoral votes. So, you can have situations like 2000 and 2016, where the person who got the second most popular votes, Bush in the former case and Trump in the latter case, won the Electoral College and hence the presidency. And so, they do at least take into account that voting for swing states, as they say, voting for Biden in swing states is essential, more important than voting for Biden in other states. But they have this notion that somehow Trump is so uniquely horrible and bad that he has these magical powers to steal elections, even in states where the outcome is pretty much never in doubt in any presidential election in recent history. So, I saw this, for example, with a Facebook friend of mine who lives in California, where in the 2016 election, Hillary Clinton beat Donald Trump by over 30%. And California hasn't been a decisive state in a close election since, I believe, 1976. So you see there a very close election between Jimmy Carter and Gerald Ford, and California went for Ford by a couple of percent. So, if there had been a couple more big states that went in Ford's column, the election would have gone the other way. But California is demographically very diverse. It's overwhelmingly a Democratic state these days. The last time it went Republican was in 1988, and that was an electoral landslide for George Bush Sr. So that doesn't count. California wasn't a swing state in that election. Because if you have an electoral landslide, then really there's no state that's a swing state, because how people vote in that state doesn't swing the election one way or the other, because there's lots of other states where the winning candidate won, and they have a comfortable cushion. My own state of Indiana, last went for a Democrat in 2008 when it went for Barack Obama. But again, Obama won in a landslide electorally, so that doesn't make Indiana a swing state. Indiana hasn't been a decisive state in a close election since the 1800s. Likewise, neither has New York. But that doesn't stop people from saying shit like this woman's therapist told her. She lives in New York, and she says her therapist told her that your third-party vote might cost us the election. So I commented, fire your therapist, but later on I commented sarcastically to the effect that, you should really talk to your therapist about his delusion that he's Joe Biden. The word us there is kind of bizarre. But in any case, New York's another one of those states that in recent history has always gone Democratic. And it does go Republican sometimes, but it's always a landslide. Just like when Indiana goes Democratic, it's always because it's a landslide. The demographics of states don't change overnight, and demographics such as the percentage of people of color you have in a state, and how rural or urban it is, things like that, have very strong effects on how people vote. Poverty also has an effect, so you have a lot of people who just don't vote if they're poor, and often if they're people of color, because they just don't see it making much of a difference in their own lives who wins. But in any case, there have been lots of examples of both parties trying to steal elections through various tactics, voter suppression, and so on and so forth. Mainly the Republicans try to do it in general elections. And there's really no doubt that, for example, the 2000 and 2016 presidential elections were stolen by the Republican Party through voter suppression. So in 2000, for instance, Florida was a decisive state, and the Democrats like to focus on Green Party voters in Florida who greatly outnumbered the margin of quote-unquote victory by which Bush won that state over Al Gore. But it fails to take into account there were roughly 30,000 African Americans whose right to vote was taken away because they were falsely accused of being felons. And the Republican administration of George Bush's brother, the governor of Florida, was responsible for that. And in 2016, in addition to other voter suppression mechanisms such as inappropriately strict voter ID laws and so-called Operation Interstate Crosscheck, which knocked voters off of registration rolls because supposedly if there's voters with the same name in multiple states, then it must be the same person, which is obviously ridiculous if it's a common name. And they were picking out names like James Brown, a common African American name, or I don't know, Jose Hernandez or something. And they were kicking people off the ballot based on that, and it cost probably millions of people their right to vote, and thus cost Hillary Clinton the election, that as well as the Electoral College. But, again, my point is this is just highly irrational assessment of Republicans' ability to steal elections, to think that they're going to be able to tip enough votes to do something more than tip the balance in states that are close. So, I try to explain this to my Facebook friend. I said, Republicans cheat every election. Trump won last time because the Republicans stole several states. But that the idea that it would be able to steal a state like California, that Clinton won by 4 million votes last time, is just dumb. If the Republicans were able to steal states that Biden should have won by wide margins, and the Democrats didn't do anything, they didn't do all they could to stop that, I pointed out to him, what would that tell you about how much the Democrats really care about whether Trump or Biden wins? And I've talked in the past about how, judging by their conduct, where, for example, they didn't try that hard to stop Bush from stealing the 2000 election, and after a perfunctory Supreme Court challenge, they focused all their blame for Al Gore's loss on the Green Party voters and Ralph Nader and so forth. It's apparent that that isn't at the top of their priority list to stop Republicans from cheating because they do it themselves. But in any case, my point here is that there are limits to how much you can rig an election without it being obvious to everyone. And in that case, I think regardless of who's on the losing end, they're going to take action to stop it. So that's all I wanted to say today. I hope you will like the segment and subscribe to the channel and comment below. Give me your thoughts on this topic, and I will see you next time.